Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to How to Win at Chess. This is a series where I take on my Twitch subscribers in 10-minute rapid games. I go up the rating ladder, walking you through the opening, the middle game, and the end game. And as is tradition in Win at Chess episodes, the first few days that one of these episodes comes out, I launch a code, and that code will get you a large % off my courses. Well, in today's video, the code is spring to celebrate some of the nice weather we have outside here in New York. I can't speak for where you are in the world. The course link is in the description. You can browse around. I've got 9 different courses, 2 boot camps, 7 opening courses, and before you all complain that the code doesn't work, it's because you're trying to buy a bundle. They are for individual courses only. All right, now that we have that formality out of the way, let us get into the games. We have a big ELO range today, 5 games, which hopefully will provide us with good content. And by content, I mean good moves. And the first one up is T-Chap. T-Chap has been trying to play me for a while. His highest rating is close to 1400, if not 1400, like 1397, which basically is that. I'm going to get us going with the more aggressive D5. So I'm going to be playing one of my favorite openings, which is the Portuguese gambit. I'm not going to be taking back with the queen, which is the Scandinavian defense. Instead, I'm going to be going for knight f6. Knight f6 really just allows white to try to hang on to the pawn. More often than not, they don't. They just give it right back, like if they play the move c4. So you just take with the knight. We've had this in a couple of Win at Chess episodes. And again, this is Black Gambit's repertoire. Use code SPRING. Now a lot of stuff can happen. Most people who get here, yeah, they might actually take. In reality, and for my stronger intermediates like 1500, you really should try to develop pieces in the opening rather than allowing your opponent to kind of take the initiative here. A lot of people do play like this. They trade very early, yeah, and then they play moves like queen f3. So now if I take my opponent's queen, he just has a knight out. If I play e6, then we're going to get a completely symmetrical pawn structure, which I have shown you all before how to play. I'm going to play c6. So I'm going to try to create a slightly imbalanced pawn structure. My options were also move my queen somewhere. I could have also done that. But just showing you how to kind of stand your ground. Okay, so he trades. I mean, a lot of people will do this. The board does seem a lot simpler with no queens early. So the major imbalance here is between c and e pawns. Now, very easy to develop here. The first thing that you should do is really play the least flexible moves first. And what I mean by that is you don't know where your bishop is going to go, right? You just don't know. You pretty much know that knight c6 is the move. More often than not, knights just develop to the middle. So he plays knight f3. Now, I could play bishop f5 targeting the pawn. I also could play bishop g4 targeting the knight, which then targets the pawn. I'm actually going to do this. I like this, and if he sees that my intention is to take this pawn, he might play c3. And at that point, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the knight anyway and show you how to play against the damaged pawn structure. I think his best move is probably bishop here or knight e5. Knight e5 allows me to take the pawn, but then he'll take my bishop. And even though I can get this and get his rook, I'm just not sure I want to give up the bishop and the knight for the rook. Like, a lot of the time, the bishop and the knight are more powerful, even if you get a pawn or two. I could go for it. I do think this is probably the best move for him. But yeah, now, well, he actually plays it. Okay. So, very tough decision here by me. I can take the knight, and then this will go here. Or I can enter this variation and maybe show you why it's bad. But this is Win at Chess. This is not chess steps. In chess steps, I would be playing knight takes d4. Like I said, 8-9 times out of 10, you don't want to get 2 pieces for the rook. So I'm going to take this. You don't want to give up 2 pieces for the rook, rather. Now we just have bishops and rooks. So it's a very tough position to play. I mean, you're always on the lookout for checks. Always on the lookout for checks for your opponent. So I'm going to play rook c8, targeting this pawn. Just a good move. This was sort of the entire idea of playing the move c6. He does give me this check. My options are move my king or bring my bishop back and make another trade. It's kind of funny. I think rather than just moving my king for seemingly no reason, I can trade, and the difference is that the king's more active on d7. When you get into an endgame of rooks and bishops with no queens, the king actually can come out. He does tend to play a pretty prominent role in endgames. I don't have to, but I will play this move. He has to trade, probably, because otherwise that pawn falls. And, yeah, I mean, this is a fascinating strategy here, which is just trade all the pieces. But there's still a lot to learn here. I mean, there's a lot to play for. So, for example, this pawn is quite weak. I'm considering trading off my f-pawn for it so that then I will take back toward the middle and get a big center. So I'm going to play g takes f6, pawn to e5, and then put my king behind the pawn. I could have also played king here, but then he just guards it. So you got to think about, like, okay, you can make one move attacking moves, but they're just going to protect themselves, so that's kind of nothing really. The difference is if he protects himself now with the pawn, he doesn't have much defense left. That pawn just sort of stands on e5 and hopes not to perish. If he moves his bishop, that is kind of an interesting move. I might attack his bishop. I might attack his bishop with my rook. I might target the pawn with the king. Again, in endgames like this, when there's not a lot of pieces remaining and also not a lot of pieces that can do damage to the king, like rooks can't really do damage to the king. You can always hide away from them. When you're in these kinds of endgames, your king is a major asset. So I'm going to take with the g-pawn so I can get more focus on the center here with the move e5. He's going to castle. Yeah, this is what I figured, but my king is definitely for choice here. Because again, I'm gonna move my king behind my center pawns, and as long as your center pawns are well protected in endgames, you're in good shape. So that attacks this. It's never too late to hang a pawn. Generally, I would say probably putting them on the opposite color of the enemy bishop is the right way to go. Although if I play b6, I could trade bishops and then get even more toward the center. So maybe that's what I'm gonna do. This idea comes with a very specific plan of actually moving every pawn that I have toward the middle so that they all work together and create passed pawns. Endgames are about a couple of things, obviously material, but let's just say that's equal. It really comes down to your piece activity and the quality of your pawn structure. So I'm going to move my king to the middle, and you really shouldn't be afraid of this. A lot of people think, oh, my king's out in the open, the white king should be safe. Not in rook, bishop, knight endgames. As long as there's no queens. Or as long as there's bishops, but you're protected. If the bishop was here or something, that'd be bad. King is very good here. One of the best moves maybe for him is to play f4 to try to break up my structure. But I don't have to panic. I mean, I can push. I can also just ignore him. I can just kind of continue with my plan. My plan was always, I could have pushed and then played this. I'm not really worried about check. That's not really concerning whatsoever. Because again, my idea is to march him down the middle of the board with my pawns. And once my pawns just sort of stand there, protected, constantly a threat, that's when I start my play with my rooks on my open files. I have much more useful open files than white here, which has sort of come by way of trading my way into this situation. So rook b8 and rook g8 has opened up lines of attack for me. He also has lines of attack, but the problem for him is that I'm very well defended. My king protects my pawns. He can take this, at which point, of course, I have to take back with the pawn, continuing to create the shield. He probably should take because that way his rooks open up. That way at least he controls the f-file with his f1 rook. Otherwise there's nothing. Really just nothing here for white. If you play f5 here, like think about it. If I play the move d4 and we trade, I suddenly have d and e connected passed pawns, which is really bad for white. To allow one passed pawn is quite bad. And he thinks for a while and he takes. Now d4 is still very much a threat, but I have lost one anchor of my pawns, which was my f-pawn. The best plan of action for him probably is to double up and get to f6 and try to harass my king. That's not really bad, but the problem is, again, I have a very simple game plan here, which is create two pawns together. Not this way. That opens my king, and this pawn will not have a clear path to the end. But now we do. He is still creating threats here. For example, rook takes d4. All right, my pawns are only defending each other, this one's only defending this one as long as my king's not in the way. So I can come up. Notice how I've dominated this endgame with barely any rook usage. That's because even though white has two very powerful pieces, unless they are on the same line, well, as you just saw, there is this tactic. He can take my pawn. Unless they are on the same line, they're not doing a whole lot. For example, if he had doubled rooks right now on the e-file, I would need to protect my pawn. But I've sort of just dominated this game with very, very good piece trading. For example, here, if I play the move e4, there is the move rook f5. And although I can drop back and attack the rook, I think, honestly, the easiest thing to do here is either to trade off one of his rooks. If you're trying to win an endgame, trading off a pair of rooks is generally the way to go, because two rooks together work very well. But just one rook really doesn't work so great. Now, it would be a massive mistake for him to trade rooks here. He really should try to keep the tension. He doesn't have many choices, but the reason this is such a bad mistake is because my rook cuts off his king. So if my rook stands on f8 against the king on g1, his king will never get involved. I will play e4, d3, king d4, e3, d2, king d3, and there it is. Now, he might do this, and this is when I have to really make sure that that endgame is winning for me. I gotta really make sure. Okay, well, he doesn't, which now allows me to play d3, and 2 passed pawns on the 6th rank or the 3rd rank, basically, you know, 2 squares before promotion, 2 pawns, which are next to each other, beat a rook, just geometrically. So as long as you can get them side by side, you just win. A rook cannot stop both. I can't do that right now because this pawn would fall, but as long as I come here and protect my pawn, the game just ends. I mean, I just marched down the middle of the board. So the entire plan came to fruition here, mainly because I traded pawns in the right way and created the right structure to do so. So for example, now I have these pawns. So I can even walk my king back, which seems like he's going to make me do. The reason why this is winning is because even with no rook, like I don't even need the rook. A rook just can't stop me. If it's just against the rook, sometimes if the king is close, it's possible, but everything is wrong here for white. You're totally cut off. Here I play d2, and there's one final trick to remember here. It looks like you can just go e2 takes e1. Normally you can, but the tragic truth is this is a check. And not only that, it's a fork. You lose both pawns, and you probably lose the game. So I can move up, but I also can move to the side, stepping out of the way of check. It's never too late to blunder a decisive check that loses the game. Just never too late. Like, please don't do that. You always have to be on the lookout. And this late in the game, you have no excuses for these kinds of mistakes. Absolutely no excuses. There's almost no pieces left on the board. You have to be able to see this stuff. All right, so there's a3, there's e2, and this is exactly why pawns together. I'm going to move out of the way of the pawns. He takes, I check. And here it's even more brutal. I don't even have to take the rook. I can check him. Only do this stuff if you're 100% certain. I can check him, force him back, check him again, and then take his rook. Very brutal. I get an extra pawn, then I will take the rook. This is a very common geometric sequence here with the queen and the rook. Fastest way to win here is just to swarm the king on the 2nd rank. With the queen and the rook, generally queen first is a little bit better, but check. And just don't stalemate. So for example, I really want to play this move. This is a stalemate, except it's not, because there are pawn moves. So you have to make sure that white always has legal moves. And now queen g3 or queen g4 would have been a mate. That was a nice game. My opponent played very solidly. He traded knights and queens early with me. And it's actually kind of funny that black, for example here, let me just show you what the evaluation would be if we followed this line. The evaluation of this position after something like this is plus 1.5. So even though I get the rook, because my knight is so horrible and he can create initiative against me with his knight and bishop against my weak king in the center, this is almost something you never want to go for. This is a tactic that many beginners and early intermediate players get really accustomed to. So they think that any time they can land it, it's really good. It's really not, because as you saw in this game, rooks are not extremely powerful. I mean, they really need circumstances to be extremely powerful. And so what did I do? I traded, I played rook c8, and then I went for this endgame very specifically, and I tried to make this exchange. And this exchange is really what got me going. Black is better here because of the better endgame central presence. Bishop e3, b6, or a6 were fine. And yeah, I mean, like I said, I thought f4 was the best move, but once we got to this position, black is just almost easily winning here. Stockfish, of course, can defend the position with the right approach. And Stockfish's approach is trying to deal with the advancement of the pawns by playing some absurd, like, tactical scheme to break up my structure. You see, if Stockfish allows this, this is just losing. 2 connected passed pawns just like this in the middle of the board, it's really, really bad news. So if you ever want to win an endgame, save the right to castle and walk up with the king and the pawns. In any endgame that doesn't involve queens, or obviously any endgame that doesn't involve, like if white had 2 knights and 2 bishops and the rooks, that's not really an endgame anyway, but you have to make sure your king is always safe. And in this case, my king was quite safe. So sometimes when you play aggressive openings like that one, hoping for a gambit, you actually have to settle for just something a little bit more solid. But I mean, I hope that game was relatively self-explanatory. There was a couple of important exchanges, trading off his center pawn, and then adding a center pawn here with bishop takes, b takes, to bring my pawns forward together. Very very instructive how to play against the rooks there and march my king up. Root beer. All right, interesting. Is my opponent... Okay, sometimes that happens. It's kind of strange, but sometimes it happens. The game will abort. Okay, so I think for this game, I'm going to play... I'm going to play the Catalan. I usually don't play this. I don't have any courses on the Catalan, but I'm going to play d4, knight f3. I'm going to play a queen's gambit, and I'm going to play g3, bishop g2 in castle, and show you how to... I mean, maybe not the theory necessarily, and you can do this in a variety of ways. You can play queen's gambit style. Yeah, so we're going for the Catalan here. Many different setups here, many involving... Okay, so this is already an inaccuracy. And at 1500, that's not... Well, I like root beer, but his face there shows all. The reason why it's an inaccuracy is because you really want to deal with this bishop without a knight on the diagonal. Now, he's playing a lot of natural moves. Generally here, I would recommend either bishop d2 or knight c3. Knight bd2 is also a possibility to block like this. Knight fd2 is what you play if you have brain damage. But, you know, it's even knight fd2 is a move. So I'm going to play knight c3. The reason is, again, you're never really worried about this pawn capture because it's really difficult for black to hang on to. White has a variety of different schemes to try to get the pawn back. This is normal, trying to kind of hit me here, but the Catalan is just way too solid, so I can play queen c2 here or queen d3. This move actually is kind of nice. It hits the knight if I need to once I castle. It defends my pawn. So yeah, I'm going to castle. Now I am actually threatening to take this because I'm no longer pinned. Usually black should take with the bishop, actually, because this knight is very strong. Yeah, see, if you do it this way, now your bishop just has to go. Now, like, it's sort of like, what was the point of even putting the bishop there, right? So the Catalan is really all about... Oh, my goodness, that is really bold. Wow, leaving the bishop there like that. I was going to say you probably have to go back toward the middle. The Catalan is all about this pressure. So, for example, rook b1 is just always a nice move. I think I'm just going to play it. I mean, it's a simple move to improve the position. Of course, threatening mate is also kind of nice. I just don't know what I'm doing after g6. Bishop f4, bishop g5 is also a good move. In the Catalan, what you often find is there are many, many, many good moves. Many of them. Like, for example, I'm not taking the pawn here because I don't want to open up my opponent's bishop. Like, that's why I'm not making that trade. There's tension here, and I would rather my bishop gets opened up. So I'm going to play rook b1. Seems like a very easy move to just improve one of my pieces to a maximum, right? I mean, just control the entire file. Rook e8 is a move, trying to play e5 perhaps. Bishop g5, knight g5, everything I'm considering. e4 is always a move as well in Catalans to try to trade open this diagonal. Could play for e4 here, but I think that loses a pawn. It's very important to be able to not forget that certain things are actually you have to be responsible for. Let's play knight g5 now. Okay, I'm going to target this. Black either has to play g6 or f5, both of which are concessions from a positional standpoint. In the sense that I'm forcing my opponent to play a potentially weakening pawn move. Now I could go for this e4 move and take it with the knight. But I really want to protect my pawn here first before I make any such big decisions. Queen f3 also continues to apply pressure. I'm just not so sure it does anything beyond that. So I am really leaning toward this bishop d2 move. But e4 looks nice, takes, and then queen f3 targeting that, and this looks kind of reasonable. It looks very reasonable. Just really want to avoid opening up the bishop for no reason. Also, anytime you see g6, it's always a good idea to play h4. Just like any time, really. Even in this case, because even though I'm castled, I have very good king defense. And h4, h5 to target this pawn, which is basically holding together the entire position, is not so bad. It's actually very common nowadays to see this in different Catalans. If the opponent plays h6 or f6, it's yet again another weakening of the position. So I'll be moving my knight back. And I've just done a decent job there of forcing the opponent to move pawns in front of their king, which almost always good. Okay, this trade has occurred. I will be taking with the queen. Now my bishop from that exchange is extremely strong, controlling that entire side. And I would like to go knight e4 now because that trade opened up my center. So anytime a pawn moves, I want you thinking what it does to the position. So for example, this move blocks mate but creates very bad dark square weaknesses. This move could weaken my king a little bit, definitely weakens this spot, but it's just trying to go h5. It also defends my knight. This move does a lot. It now grants me access to certain squares. Queen d7 is a little bit short-sighted in the sense that it guards this, but I mean, I don't know how black deals with the dark squares here. I mean, knight f6 is coming, and it's going to be devastating. And if you try to prevent it with a queen move, I have bishop g5, and then I'm forcing my way in. And if you try to prevent it with a king move, it's the same fate. Not to mention, if the king gets closer, I can still play h5. It's important to understand that h5 is there no matter what. It's there even if it's a free pawn for black, because this structure is terrible. Like, look at what's going on with black's doubled h-pawns, open king. It's almost always good to throw in the pawn. And I did predict this move. Here comes bishop g5. The same way you always want to look if there's moves that come with a check, you always want to look if there's moves that come with tempo. And tempo is everything in chess. It's a move that improves your position with an attack. So it forces a reaction out of you. So the move knight e4 comes with tempo because the threat is knight f6. Okay? The move dc4 also came with tempo because it attacks this, but it wasn't a good move. It was a very simple recapture by me, and it opened up all my central squares, right? My transition squares to the other side of the board. Bishop g5 comes with tempo, locks down f6, and I'm in there. And you'll notice that all the pawns on this side of the board are on light squares, and I'm entering on the dark squares. And all of that was because of knight g5. So queen a3 is an interesting move. Is there any threat? Not really. I can kick the queen out. I guess then it would go here. Is my opponent really going to take that pawn? Like, in the middle of battle, is my opponent just going to... No shame. Okay. Let's check. I mean, you got to go protect your rook, most likely. And if you don't... Oh, but it's real bad. Oh, it's actually really bad. I just realized that it's actually a lot worse than I thought it was. My initial intention was not even to take the rook. So as you get stronger and stronger, you start getting more creative, for better or for worse, in chess. So knight takes e8 is not something I wanted to play, because actually the relative value of my knight here is so strong. Meaning if I play bishop h6, for example, the king has to... You know, my knight is controlling so many important squares. But I just realized that if I do take the rook, and the king takes, this move is possible. Which is something that normally you never play a move like this in the Catalan. But it's check, and now my queen also forks the king and the rook. So normally you never give up that Catalan bishop. But if it comes with winning a pawn and a rook, you do. And now even another piece. So the bishop on the back rank is dominated. So we use that Catalan bishop to completely butcher down that position. So yeah, this was like honestly a perfect style Catalan at intermediate level. He takes on c3. We do obviously still have to be a little careful. Oh, and here we're going to do something really brutal. So again, as I said, sometimes when you get stronger, you get too creative for your own good. So I want to play queen c8 here, right? But then his king runs. So sometimes in chess, as you get stronger, you can weave a mating net. You see this move, and it can't be stopped, but you want to prevent the king from escaping. So you play bishop f6, which is a brutal move. Now black cannot escape the back rank. He's not quick enough. Now, the only reason you would avoid this move is if black can check you, which he can, but then I would take, right? So there's no counterattack, and there's no way to guard the bishop. So bishop f6 is a very nasty move. And yeah, so he's sacrificing his queen, but obviously... Oh, there's queen e8. That's really funny. I just completely forgot about that move. I'm actually lucky that I have a nail in the coffin here. You can trade queens and win the endgame up to rooks, but there's rook b8 here. Look at that. I played too quickly for my own good. Rook b8 is a very nice idea, applying more pressure to this back rank, and it's mate. So it's mate no matter what, because this bishop f6 move completely dominates. I might have actually accidentally played the stockfish line there. Queen c6. Yeah, so this is still mate in 3. This is mate in 5. I was very lucky that I had rook b8. Rook b8's a nice move. You know, obviously, if you want to go into an endgame up 2 rooks, I should obviously trust that you would win this, which is also fine. You don't have to find the move rook b8. It's a very unique kind of a move. The way you find a move like rook b8 is you basically just say, well, I don't want to let the king free. So what do I do here, right? Oh, I have backup. My queen gets backup, and now I actually threaten to take black's queen rather than just trading. This doesn't work because, first of all, it's not mate. Like, mate is obviously better than winning a queen. But there's also this. So it just doesn't work. I mean, the king will continue to defend the queen. So knight c6 is not a good move. If you want to play against the Catalan, you should try to take. And if you want to hang on to this pawn early, a6, b5 is the way to go. So a6, trying to defend like this. And basically not worrying about the bishop attacking the rook, because there is knight to d5. Now at 15, 1600, it's really, really a tall task to have a weapon against the Catalan. Personally, I would recommend the triangle defense. Like if you see a Catalan is coming, play for a triangle setup. It's extremely solid. It's very difficult to break through. It's a little bit passive, but black can just very slowly, you know, build up the pieces. And what you can do here is play like knight to d7 and then play b6 and bishop b7. This is how black will set up. Very, very, very slowly, but really solid, no nonsense setup. And then maybe try to play c5. So if white takes, you can take with either pawn or the knight. If white doesn't take, then at some point you will play c5. And when you're ready, your position will meet the white position smack in the middle. There's 2 real approaches to the Catalan. It's taking the pawn and not taking the pawn. So if you don't take the pawn, and you don't know all the forced lines of defending your position from total imminent collapse, then you shouldn't take the pawn. But putting your knight in front of your c-pawn kills a lot of your flexibility, because now your bishop really struggles to develop. And when you try to refute the Catalan by just chopping it down, you can't. This opening is so resilient. It's +2 here for white. +2. Can you imagine? It's a +2 advantage. Rook b1, rook e8, knight g5, and it's +3. Move 11 for white. It's a +3 advantage. Did white do anything special? No. I had to defend against one threat. I induced a weakness. Computer here likes this with rook b5. I mean, I didn't think of that. Instead, I played h4, which I thought was relatively reasonable. But this trade is now +4. And now it's +6. So it just went from bad to worse. Yeah, I mean, now it's +9. It's move 15, it's +9 for white. I don't have a course on the Catalan, but I think the Catalan is one of the most solid openings. It's really good for people who want to combine just kind of slow grinding advantages, just slowly improving your position with obviously some tactics if they are presented. It's not like a automatic victory by any means, but it's a really annoying opening past a certain level. At the level where opponents are playing respectable defenses, like the Queen's Gambit declined, like, you know, sometimes you're going to have opponents that play England Gambits. You're going to have opponents that play, I don't even know. I mean, you play this, they're playing all sorts of wild stuff, or, you know, something like this. Like, you can't play Catalans against people who play Queen f6. and, you know, try to play like this. And then you, like, forget you can take this. You get, like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know what I'm talking about. Like, there's people who just play all sorts of nonsense, and you're out here trying to play your Catalan. So, all right, next game is against a Greek player, 1660, 1659. E4 again. So this time I'm going to play, I think I'm going to play, there's Karo Khan, of course, as an option. I'm going to play E6 and B6. One of my black repertoires, universal setup, E6, B6. There's also French defense, obviously, but I really like this setup. I mean, it teaches you how to play and maneuver in positions with a lack of space. Last game, we had all the space. So the Catalan often can push the opponent all the way back into a corner from which they cannot very easily emerge. So bishop b7 targets the pawn. Bishop d3. Here there's bishop goes to b4 to pin the knight, but there's no knight there. So what I like to do is just go d5. And d5 attacks the middle. If they take, I like to take with the queen. The reason for that is my queen can move and then target the knight with my open bishop. Whereas, okay, so e5 is also very common, and here black responds with c5. E5, c5. And what we do here is we see what white is doing. Where white is trying to focus the pieces. We're going to keep the tension here. We're also not going to push because the bishop slides back and we've accomplished nothing. And bishop a6 is a very common idea here, to trade the light squared bishop, but not right now, because if you do that right now, then you get hit with queen a4 check, and that's a very tragic way to lose. So often this knight goes here, and then we can trade. So I'm going to play knight e7. You ask, what about this bishop? Give it a sec. This knight has to go first. And we're not playing f6 because white is not just going to make it easy for us. So you maneuver behind your wall of pawns. I play like knight e6, then I will put my bishop on e7, and then I will try to trade the light squared bishop. So that is the idea. Code Spring, y'all. Nice 40% off. Not on bundles, though. Don't write to the support if you can't do it. Bishop e3. So bishop a6 is possible. Queen c8 and bishop a6 is possible. Bishop e7 is possible. They're all relatively interchangeable. I think I'm going to just play bishop a6 now. I don't know why I wouldn't. I think I can just play bishop a6 now. So queen a4 is always an idea. It's always annoying. But everything in our position is very well protected. And then queen a4. I can protect with my queen to c8, both knights, or I can even protect by just going right back. And our game plan, so actually the best way to play here with white, this whole system with black, is to take a bunch of space over here, which not a lot of people know to do. This is a very natural move, by the way. I would not be shocked if it's played. Because you're like, oh, I attack both knights. You don't actually do anything, but it's a very natural move. So, again, because white's position is facing this direction, this is where really white should be attacking. A lot of intermediate players, even at 1660, don't know that. So it's tough to figure out what you're supposed to do in these kinds of situations. But you really should be playing for f4, g4, f5. Okay, that's an interesting idea. So I want to play b5, so I'm thinking to rotate my knight back. I'm also thinking to play c4, and then I even have the option to damage the position. But I think I'm going to play maybe knight back to c7. This just seems like a pretty natural retreating move to support b5, a5, c4, b4, etc. My queen can always go to d7 to kind of cover stuff, so not an incredibly concerning situation here. I've had games where they take. 2 games ago, I took with the bishop and traded toward the middle. In this case, I don't know which one I would do. But those are probably my next few moves. And there is also one wild card idea here, which is bishop e7, supporting g5, and then g5, g4. There's this very interesting idea to shove your g-pawn forward. I don't think I'm going to be doing that, but it is an idea. So c4 now looks quite natural. And then b5. Also just improving my position for a few more moves. Doesn't really hurt. Just moving the bishop out, controlling those squares. Maybe I'll even castle. Castling is always a thing. Just why not castle before I go to war here? White doesn't have any infiltration spots. So my position is rock solid. I just need a game plan. My game plan at some point will be moving forward here. Now if I play c4, there is b3 to try to undermine me. I don't want to play b5 yet because then they can take. I'm going to go c4. I think we've reached the moment where it's time to lock the structure and it's time to indicate to white that this is happening. This expansion on the queen side is occurring. All my pieces are facing that direction. Will white be able to fight back here against my space advantage on the queen side? That's a normal move. That does weaken these squares. So now I can even go here. Admittedly, I will be met there. So a6, b5 is still an idea. I like this idea. I think it's very simple. It's better to keep my pawns together. Obviously, as we've seen even in the first game, pawns together do very well. This move also kind of completely shuts down the option to play b3. Because the reason why b3 was so good a move ago after c4 was that the pawn would take. And again, pawns together are better. Now, I'm not sure. Because if you do this and your c-pawn stays weak, it's not good. So I might do this. I might play b5. I might castle, play queen up, and then bring 2 rooks over. I don't know what this does. What does that do? Are they looking at g5? They could be looking at g5, maybe wanting to trade some pieces with me, but now knight a5 looks really nice to try to play knight b3. Yeah, I really like that, actually. Knight a5 immediately gave me a target, which I didn't have before, so now I'm trying to do that. Opponent might stop my threat, but knight d2 is just so passive. I mean, it's just such an unfortunate move to have to play. It seems like the position is totally going in the wrong direction. I mean, just absolutely the wrong direction. You put your queen, and then you back and break the diagonal with the queen and the bishop with the knight. So it seems like I'm doing a good job here, making white retreat. Another good... Oh. That's just a blunder? I mean, the fork is there no matter what. The fork is there even with the bishop trade. So you don't. It's not checkers. You don't have to take here. I guess my opponent was like, oh, I'm going to take. But if I take the queen, they take my queen. So I'm just going to go here. And the fork is still very much there on b3. So that a4 move granted me that square weakness, and I just went in, and it wasn't prevented. So this game will be decided once I win this pawn, unless my opponent hangs all their pieces right now. But this game will be decided if we trade everything and I just advance in. And basically, once I get to these pawns and the whole structure falls apart, the base of the position falls apart, I will just be victorious. This is really how you play these e6, b6 positions. By the way, I almost don't want to take. Remember a couple of games ago, I said I almost didn't want to make this trade, but you have to. It's a substantial winning of material, and you really should be making this trade. Now, castling, putting the rook on the b file, and just going to town over here is the way we're going to win this game. I guess I'm just going to castle now. I really need my second rook. My entire advantage here is rook for knight, so I really should get my rooks in the game. The only thing you don't want to do here is get blockaded. What I mean by that is when you have 8 pawns and your position is relying on pawn breaks, not all pawn breaks are the same. For example, the move f6 is not that bad of a move, but it opens up my opponent's rook and it opens up the knight to the middle. This is where I want to break through, right? My position faces this direction. However, if I play b5 here, white is not just going to take. h4, look at that. White is not going to take, they're going to play a5. And then I cannot play b4. So imagine a position where I go here and I get my entire queen side shut down. I'm in trouble, because that means I can't open up the position. However, if I prepare correctly and I stomp a5 by playing a5 and then playing b5, then I force open the b file, and that is how I win the game. Now here there are still some attacking ideas. It's never too late to lose. So for example, yeah, there you go. That's an attacking idea. I shouldn't blunder a fork. So I guess I'm going to play queen d7. But that allows me to play a5. There's still this and this. And then queen h7. I mean, as much as I like my position, there are still definitely ways to lose because my king is not being protected by anything. So queen b1, a5, knight g5 is a real problem. So I think what's going to happen is if queen b1 gets played, I have to prevent it with h6. I have to stop the knight from arriving on the g5 square. I cannot just lazily focus on my own queenside plan. So I hope I'm making sense. Make sure there are no pawn blockades. If my queenside gets blocked, like for example, a very good example, I play b5, a5. That's it. I cannot break through against this knight, which means that the rest of the game will turn over here. And my rook versus knight advantage is not felt. All right, so, okay, I don't know what that does, so I'm going to play a5. I guess my opponent's looking for some sacrifices. I don't know, actually. I don't really know what my opponent's doing, but b5. So that's it. The queen side is about to be opened up. And if the base of operations for my opponent collapses on b2, so will the entire position. So I have mentioned, I have foreshadowed this. I think the only chance my opponent has is to go completely all out. Yep, something like that. So I'm thinking to take. To open it, I can go b4, b3, but I guess my entire plan has been to open up the queen side, so let's just take the pawn. Rook g3 is coming. I love this by my opponent, by the way, showing how to fight back in a bad position, creating counterplay on the king. Their idea is right. Their plan is just too slow, I think. But their idea is correct. I mean, they really have the right idea, I have to say. I am pretty impressed. Like when you are in a really difficult position, you have to return fire. You cannot just sit there and die. Look at this, queen c1, incredible move. Rook g3 and queen h6 is coming. Wow. I actually have to respect this because if queen b5 and the rook moves and I take, there is queen g6. Oh, queen h6. It's not over. Folks, this game is not over. Like, it looks bad, but... so let's calculate. Queen b5, rook g3, queen b2. First of all, we have to look at checks. So rook takes g7, king takes, queen check. I hide. Queen check. I hide. That looks good. So queen b5, rook g3. Here, the queen goes to g5, threatening mate. I'm thinking my knight can come back. That's what I'm thinking. I don't know if it works, but that's what I'm thinking. I think my knight can stop a mate there. The alternative is I totally change my game plan here and I just go for full defense mode. But how can I do that? I mean, I've been attacking the entire game. What about h6, rook g3, and then I move my king out of the pin? Or for example, queen b5, rook g3, and then I move my king. So there's no longer a pin. Really feels like I'm going in the wrong direction. But if I go queen b5, queen b2, then like I have to know I'm winning, right? I mean, I just have to know. Otherwise, I'm gonna lose, and it will be very sad. There's no way to sugarcoat that. Let's go for it. Queen b5. And you know what? If we lose, we lose. But we calculated. We should be in good shape. It's either him or me. I claimed a long time ago, yep, there's queen h6. So I'm thinking about just knight back to e8 here. This is a very important move. You must have a move like knight e8. I cannot take the knight. You must have a move like this. g6 also, but I'm going to go knight e8. And I think knight e8 somehow just safeguards my entire position. And now there are problems for white. First of all, the knight is catastrophically positioned. There is also knight g4. Oh, that hangs a queen. That hangs a queen. I thought knight g4 actually worked. But that actually hangs the queen because it gets in the way of the rook. Oops. I was thinking knight g4, but it doesn't work at all. So I don't know. If you've been met completely with a line of defense, I think queen g5 was the best move. I think you have to play queen g5 because queen h6 prevented the move knight g4. Whereas now, if the queen had been on g5, knight g4 would have been possible. So I really like this. I think this was a very sophisticated piece of counterattack by white. I don't think it was bad at all. Yeah, white should be proud of this. Okay, yeah, I mean, now I have a really funny move, which is queen takes c3. So I don't even know if I want to do that. Queen c3, and if this, then I take the queen. I might have something better. I might just have like queen e2, which just looks very annoying. And then bringing my rook down. I might do that. I like this. I mean, queen c3 was also strong. But I like the fact that my rook can join the party because my queen needs some help. My queen cannot fight the entire army by herself. So queen e2 creates a threat. It opens the door for the rook. Once my rook gets down there, if I can sack my rook for 2 knights, I'm just completely winning. It's just a completely winning position because now white loses even 2 more pieces that can fight. Not to mention when the dust settles, I have an a-pawn, and I am actually 3 squares away from making a queen. I could have played a3. I don't know. Might have even been the best move there. But rook b1, and I'm going to sack that rook. That is my plan here. I'm going to get rid of one of my rooks for those 2 knights. Crazy game. Very, I mean, we combined e6, b6 kind of game plan with understanding counterattack, you know, how to defend against counterattack. I think there was a lot of good concepts in this game. So I guess my opponent is basically trying to say, I don't have... Oh, I thought he was just moving his king out of the way or something. So I take, and my defense is still there. So 2 knights have perished. The rook and the queen are the only things remaining. I can pick this up. I'm actually now threatening to take. It's kind of funny. I'm threatening to take. Okay, now I'm not threatening to take. Obviously. I'm probably going to go here. Because if takes, then I take. And then... So queen e7 looks very scary. That doesn't look scary. And now we just play a3. And my that's it. I think I should just be... Yeah, white just resigns. Okay, everything in this game was relatively self-explanatory as well. I hope I've been doing a good job kind of keeping you all posted. Computer really doesn't like this. Why not? It thinks that there's a way for white to try to shred open the position. But if white waits and plays like knight d2, then I will play here and a couple of incorrect moves in a row. And I already have tactics on the queen and something like this. So maybe bishop a6 was a bit rushed. Maybe I should have played queen c8 first and tried to get a position where my queen is out, for example. Yeah, I mean, what did I do in this game? I mean, I played c4. This move weakened this square. When queen c1 happened, I immediately tried to punish it. Opponent made a blunder, and we just had to defend. I really like this counterplay. I really like what my opponent did here. I thought this was very sophisticated. And yeah, Stockfish just thinks this is -8. It basically just doesn't see an attack for white. But as a human, I mean, are you really going to tell me that this doesn't look absolutely terrifying when your king has completely been abandoned by everybody? So I was calculating this variation in my head, you know, where I just take and then he checks me and I can't take because it's mate, but I'm fine. Now, the reason why black is fine here is because if knight takes e8 threatening checkmate, you have to find the defensive move here by black, which is not easy at all, which is not taking the knight and just bringing the queen back. And so, for example, a queen trade is horrible for white, but if white plays something like this, you can give a check, win the knight, and you're just obviously completely winning. But you have to understand, folks, when the opponent, when Stockfish in this position says -8, queen b5, it sees the position 8 moves ahead. That's what we always have to remember about Stockfish. You're like, oh my God, how did I miss this -8 move? You didn't. You didn't miss it. It's -8 because 8 moves later, Stockfish sees this crazy defense. You're human. You're human. You have to see this. So I thought queen g5 was scarier. The reason I wasn't so afraid of queen h6 is because I knew that I could defend. If I play g6, I actually lose. Because just like in that Catalan game, horrible dark square weaknesses. Look at this. I just perish. I perish under the dark square attack, which is nuts. So it's never too late to just screw everything up, right? It's all about understanding the opponent's threats. And so when this happened, I just kind of went, well, let me not move a pawn unnecessarily. Let me just defend. The hot spot of this position is the g7 pawn. If I can just keep myself protected, I'm going to break through on the queen side. So I hope that game was a nice lesson in attack and defense, kind of the, you know, the way to play the e6, b6 positions. And my opponent is not online. So let me make sure. Please be in live chess. You are next. Happens. I might start just the next game because both of my next opponents are 2000. We can give it about 10 seconds. This always happens, folks. Just forget or disconnect. Or leave. Or leave. Or my next opponent is also not here. That would be very tragic. I'm not going to cut the recording, though. Okay. This is terribly inconvenient by the audience. All right, so no, I'm gonna be skipping an individual here. I was gonna play two 2000s. Yeah, I don't know where one of my 2000s went. So we have a 2000. So we're gonna end with a big game here. So I played e6, b6. I played d5. I think for this one I gotta go back to the ye olde trusty, which is the Carl Khan. I've got courses on all of these. I like e6, b6 because it's a system-based repertoire. You can play it against everything. This you can only play against e4, e5. So e4, e5. Against e4. Okay, we have e5. So bishop f5 is a mainline Caro. My Caro course recommends this move. I really like this move. I think it's extremely, extremely flexible. Good at damaging the center. I say flexible. I meant to say forceful. I said the wrong word. It's not flexible. It's very forcing. It splits the center. Now there are two lines, knight c6 and e6. So knight c6 is fine. E6 is also okay. I'm going to play knight c6 this time. So f4 is in my e4 course. If my opponent has my e4 course, I'm going to be in some trouble. I actually stopped playing knight c6 because of how strong the move f4 is. I don't play knight c6 anymore. But not a lot of people play knight c6, f4. But if my opponent plays my own e4 course against me, I'm going to be very sad. Most people here will just play knight f3 or bishop b5. What's my opponent thinking? Not very many moves here. Okay, knight f3, right? So e6 is also fine. It blocks in the light squared bishop, but at least there is no f4. So now we play bishop g4. This is the point. This is what you do. You split the center pawns, and you get very active development. So our bishop is pinning the knight to the queen. Next is e6. And then we might take. And then our knight will go to e7, g6. Queen will come here. This might be the shortest Win the Chess episode ever. Well, not by time. It's going to be over an hour. It's going to be instructive. But yeah, it's very frustrating. I get very upset when subscribers sign up to play. And I always say, if you have to go, just tell me. Just tell me. I can replace you. But then they just don't show up. Very upsetting. e6. Not complicated. Opening up our dark squared bishop. Bishop f4 is already an inaccurate move, which is kind of nuts. Think about this. My opponent is 2,000. That is higher than 99.8% of players in the world. Already inaccurate on move 6. Shows you that if you know your openings, you know what's good. The bishop belongs on this square. Because it has to go to d4. There's an approach here by white to play c3, bishop here, and glue the bishop in the middle to protect both pawns. This is not a good move because my setup is knight e7, knight g6. And I'm going to hit the bishop. So you really don't want that. So easy recapture of the pawn here. So I've got that out of the way. I think that's just a blunder. Don't I just have queen b6 here? Whoa. So you always got to be thinking aggressive. Like knight e7, knight g6 is kind of the lazy developing approach. But the other tactical idea here is that this is hanging and this is hanging. This is another reason the bishop should be on e3, by the way, instead of f4. Because when the bishop is on e3, it defends against c5 being taken. I think queen b6 is just very good. I'm just going to win 2 pawns. Queen b6, castles, queen b2. Knight here, queen c3. If my queen gets attacked, I just move it, like to a3 maybe. The only risk that you run when you get greedy like this is that your queen gets trapped somehow. But I don't see how that's going to happen. I could be completely miscalculating this. But yeah, so white, of course, should lose the b pawn, not this pawn. You should not lose the pawn near your king, especially if the way to get out of it is castling. What I might do before I take is I might take the knight first. This is also something that I've learned by experience. The bishop on f3 for white does nothing to this middle. Nothing. It doesn't threaten the middle of the board at all. The knight does. And the bishop controlling these squares is also very annoying. So I think what I'm going to do is before I take my 2 pawns with sauce to go, I think I'm going to make this trade and leave my opponent's both light and dark squared bishops completely immobilized. I always say you shouldn't trade a bishop for a knight unless there's a good reason. This is a very advanced description of a good reason. It's the fact that in this kind of a structure, if the light squared bishop for the opponent bites into a permanently locked light squared center, they're in bad shape. Their bishop is not going to get active, and it's going to be really difficult for them to actually create any counterplay. So here it is. I'm going to take, as promised. Then I'm going to go here. Opponent is probably going to play knight d2. It's the only move, I think. There actually is one trick here. There is queen b3. I will be extremely impressed if they find this. Letting me take the rook, but trapping my queen. If queen b3 is played, I have to trade queens. They didn't see it. It happens. But you got to be really careful when you wander into territory like this, because you could lose the queen. If you are not careful, it could be lost. Now, I also don't have to take the second pawn. I could just finish my development, but it's there. I might as well. I'm up 2 pawns now. I do have to be a bit careful, of course, but... So rook c1, for example, if I play queen a5, I get hit with a fork. However, rook c1, queen b4 hits the bishop. So I am also threatening a bishop, which might be forgotten. If I go here, there is this. So always look for maximum danger for yourself. But queen b4 also attacks this. So I slow down my opponent's initiative by targeting that misplaced bishop, which would have never been possible otherwise. Yeah, so my opponent totally forgot about this. Oh my goodness, this is actually crazy. My opponent is collapsing. It's totally collapsing here. And it happens. I mean, if you don't know the ideas of an opening, sometimes this does occur. I think I'm just going to play knight e7. I can also trap the rook. It's kind of a funny situation. Sometimes when rooks get real close, they can be... I don't like that my knight is unguarded, though. Bishop b6 might be the best move, but I want to be solid and I want to get my king to safety. I don't want to try to get too fancy. I'm already winning. I don't want to... Bishop b6 very well could be the best stockfish move, but... Queen c2. You might not leave me a choice now. I mean, you're targeting my bishop, right? I also have this, but this just seems... I mean... You're making me do it, man. I have no choice now. And my knight is protected. And yeah, this is a really, really nice situation. Castling and then knight to d4. And I did not expect, but listen, this is what happens when you know your Caro-Kann very well. I personally think that of all my courses, the Caro repertoire is probably the most thorough. I mean, you just see how at 2000 misplayed the opening ever so slightly. And the tactics immediately overwhelm them. So, yeah. Use code SPRING. Knight b3 does not have a threat as far as I can tell. I could just try to trap this rook. I have a move knight d8 here. But again, I'm not going to get too greedy. I honestly just want to castle with my king to safety. Now I can go to battle. The white rook is still totally trapped. The only thing that I can't do here is move so easily. But I do have a nice little tactic. So for example, in this position, knight c5, I mean, the easiest thing to do is just to trade. But I have a cool tactic. I can play knight takes e5, which looks like I'm hanging my knight, which I imagine will get captured. At which point I can play knight takes bishop check, pawn takes bishop, and that pawn trade, I always tell you guys, you have to look how pawns open, when pawns move, how the board changes. The king is open. And when the king is open, I can't check here, because my queen would get taken by the pawn, but I can check on this square. And that square hits the king and the rook, which just went here. So let's see if we can predict the future. My opponent's going to go, oh my god, he blundered. I take, they have to recapture, because otherwise it's mate. Queen g5 wins their knight. And they might resign at that point. They also might just see this sequence because it's checks. Or not. This is how you predict the future. Look at that. Queen g5. How the board changes. Look at that. Very nice. Queen g5. This is how you avoid blunders and you calculate short sequences. And queen takes rook. And we tricked them. We tricked them. We got a rook for knight. But we were a piece up. So now we are just up a rook. And that looks scary, but my opponent even blunders one more piece. So we just have to very, very quickly not hang a mate. There are a lot of ways to protect this. So folks, the difference between last game and this game, if I play g6 right now, it's fine. And I will play it. Of course, we can just block the diagonal. I'm just going to show you, this is very different because in the last game, there were more pieces that could help. Okay, queen h8 is a very funny final move. So in the last game, I just want to compare like different patterns. So we have had this structure in 3 positions in this video. Okay, my position against root beer, which looked like this. The difference here is that I had 2 pieces that guaranteed entry, right? And they were low value pieces, and I was attacking high value pieces, and my low value pieces were crushing the high value pieces. And that was completely dominant because it was just completely unstoppable. This game, I had to be very careful, because if I had went for this exact same structure with the move g6, my opponent was going to overwhelm me. The only thing there was a king, nothing else. And attacking it was 17 points of material, right? 9 plus 5 is 14 plus 3 is 17. Okay, so 17 points were attacking my king. The difference between this and what we saw in the final position, this is not really an attack. Like if I play g6 here, okay, I guess, right? But the difference is there's no backup. So there's no backup, number one, and number two, my counterplay is very fast. So for example, if you give white 3 moves in a row, white will go h4, h5, h6, mate. But I will go here. Goodbye. My counterplay is immediate. The second that I make a move, the game is over. Right? Like queen f2, queen g1, like the game is over. The difference in the games is that here, where is my counterplay? I can give a check and that's it. My queen is on the opposite side of the board. I have almost no access back. And if I try to make a second queen, I get mated by the time it happens. So understanding your counterplay, like the difference between attack and defense, right? If you give your opponent 3 moves in a row, that's how I want you to think about it. Are you going to lose the game? Yes, in this case, absolutely. But in this game, you are going to immediately strike back. And by the time h4, right, happens, then. Having said that, the best move here for sure is queen d4. Yeah, I mean, just get in the way. Don't weaken your king unnecessarily. But my opponent, Nolan Zeld, is apologizing, saying that they're saying sorry for playing so badly. Don't do that. Listen, there's a lot of reasons why some games last longer than others. I've had people cheat against me in some of these episodes, you know, because they just don't want to get blown off the board. But I felt like today's games were pretty instructive. I wish I would have gotten to play more games with white, but I hope that Catalan actually was good. I feel like in this hour, we accomplished a lot. Normally these episodes are 90 minutes, but hey, 1 hour episode on a Sunday or whenever you're watching this can't be so bad. Very frustrating that the other 2,000 that I wanted to play just totally vanished. Didn't even come back and be like, yo, my bad. Just straight up disappeared. But that's life. I will see you all for episode number 22. Thank you all for your continued support. And if you made it this far and you enjoyed, let me know in the comments. And go check out some of the courses. Remember, you can't get the bundles with the code because they're already discounted. All right, that's like robbing the bank and then the ATM. Although I don't know if maybe you would do that. But yeah, they're available on individual courses for about 3-4 days after this episode. I'll see you in the next one. Get out of here.